right.
Says we're live. I think we're live.
Okay. Very cool. Welcome everybody to our roadmap planning live stream. Happy you're here. So without any further ado, let's get into it. It's an exciting time. Exciting time to be doing remix stuff. Lots and lots of stuff, good stuff on the roadmap. So yeah, recently we have already talked about, I think we talked last time about a lot of the stuff that we've already like merged and shipped.
We talked about a few of them. I don't know if we hit bundle shredding and single fetch, did we?
We did talk about single fetch because I remember I confused that with something else.
Right. That's right.
But yeah, that was the one that's like the dependency for middleware.
Yeah. And then remix SPA target. Okay. Cool, man. We've been busy. I didn't get to prep too much for this. And sorry for being late. That's my fault. I got some electricians here and they wiped out my power and my internet went down. But here we are.
Where is it all? But yeah, let's talk about bundle shredding, kind of what that is, and then let's talk about Jacob's RSC, RFC.
Yeah.
So many acronyms.
That's good. Where
the ISR, PPR, RFC, RSC.
I'm really glad that we still haven't made up any new acronyms. We've been a framework for 2 years publicly, 1 year in framework stealth mode, and still haven't made up.
We'll get one.
We've used a few, like progressive enhancement, PE.
There you go.
SWR, cache control, but we haven't made up any. All right, what am I going for? I'm just yakking.
That's right. Kent did the PESPA.
Yeah, and PEMPA, I think.
Progressive enhanced single page app. Is that it?
I think so. We always were giving him a hard time when he was here working with us. We're like, no acronyms. We don't. There are enough acronyms in web development. No more. Okay, so bundle shredding. This is I can't shred on the guitar. I'm just power chords guy. Can you shred? Like,
no, I'm not really a shredder.
You don't got the pentatonic scale across the whole fretboard figured out?
I'm the rhythm guitarist.
Yeah.
I'm the lead man. I'm the front man.
I mean, Weezer, he does the singing and he does the lead
part. He shreds. Yeah. That's why I'm not Weezer. That's why I'm writing code.
All right. So bundle shredding is like people would describe Remix as a fat Lambda when you deploy it to like AWS or Cloudflare, or the AWS wrappers and Cloudflare wrappers, I guess, like Vercel and Netlify and stuff, and Arc. So what that means, fat Lambda, is we take the whole app, all your routes, everything, create one big server build, and then drop that on the server or the serverless function. And so bundle shredding is like, okay, instead of doing that, let's figure out all of the different route branches and create a bundle for every single one of those and deploy all of those independent or to separate functions. And that way, faster startup times for cold starts, just less memory when it is running. And just generally the performance there's some pretty big performance wins. I was talking to someone at Cloudflare, and he was saying this is pretty important to us because he says, I didn't even expect to get as big a performance wins as you get out of doing this. And he works at Cloudflare. So it's something we've always wanted to do. From the beginning, we were kind of thinking about this, but every time we went to like think about putting it on the roadmap, everybody would announce that you can have more memory now in a serverless function, you can deploy more code to the serverless function. Like every single time, all their limits, they kept like bumping up significantly. and it was like, let's just keep punting on this. But time to punt is done. It's
The
time
can
to
has been kicked
yeah,
down
the
the
can
road.
has been kicked. The game's over.
It's
It's time to
now
do it.
tired of being kicked. Yeah, so the basic idea is we've got a couple of providers that we want to target. Vercel has a build output API. Cloudflare Pages also has a build output API that they don't call it the build output API, but it is.
Yeah, just
It's
dump some
a
files in this folder and
yeah. Dump the yeah. Make the files look like this, and so and then you can deploy to Cloudflare workers, right? So that's our goal is with bundle shredding is to just target these first two providers. We're hoping that we can actually get Vercel's help with this because Nate, Too Tall Nate actually helped us with the they actually forked our dev tools in V1, and they had some patches that they were applying to our compiler to make it do what it needed to do for Vercel's build output API. But it should be a lot easier now with our Vite compiler to just, basically add another plugin to the array, and you should be able to output for Cloudflare Pages.
Yeah, that's the hope.
For Vercel.
And yeah, you wouldn't have to fork it like Vercel had to deploy this way. It should just be a plugin to Vite.
Yep.
Who knew? Lean on community stuff, and lots of power is unlocked.
Yep. So we got Mark looking into that. But that's let's talk about Jacob's RFC. Where is that?
It is. Is that not showing up?
Yeah, no, it is. It is. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was looking at sharing the whole window.
Yeah, no, I wasn't looking at the stream. I was looking at my desktop.
So what's this? We've been, I guess, researching RSC for a long time. Honestly, ever since Dan first showed it to us a long time ago. There's some trade-offs and stuff with it, and we've been messing around. We've built several of our own kind of proof of concepts. One of them we thought we were going to release, but don't think we're going to do that anymore. That's just like a fun little side, like, hey, what do you all think about this? But I think we have our opinions now on RSC, and I think we're ready to go for it.
Yeah, I mean it's like, yeah, we tried to reverse engineering it at one point. Like the thing is, we're writing code in a we like Remix is a different paradigm from Next, right? Which is not a different paradigm. It's a different. We have a lot of different philosophies, like philosophical differences from Next, and the way that they're doing RSC is obviously designed for Next. It's very they're using Webpack and there's a lot of opinions there. And so we basically this week we forked React so that we can make some actual PRs to React. And I think the first one is going to be basically the work that they've done for Webpack, and we want to do for Vite. I think some work has already been done out there, but we just want to make an official kind of PR from our side that just says, hey, here's, because what RSC does is, it sends these, you essentially server side, you have to teach it how to, like, basically any RSC client, whether it's the SSR server or it's the browser, has to know how to find modules. And so the Webpack React server DOM Webpack package that they're using there has it basically relies on like the Webpack require and the Webpack what's it called, like Webpack Resolve hooks to be global, and we're not using Webpack. So we basically have to make something like that for Vite that we can use with our Vite bundler. And then I think it's just going to be this basically the same, basically the ultimately I think it'll just be like a similar implementation to what Next has with React Server components. Not this RFC, not this RFC, right? This RFC is all about how can we pave a smooth path for people who want to take advantage of some of the cool things in RSC, but they don't want to completely change their, programming paradigm.
Yeah, and we want a migration path that isn't like, okay, take this whole branch of your UI, this entire route, and move it to some other like folder, and now make everything work over there for that whole feature set. We want to be able to just migrate stuff over to RSCs first where it makes sense to, and second, just like the smallest bit possible. So that's kind of how I view this RFC. There is some open discussion with people in the community and on our team about like, well, maybe some of these concepts we also want to keep, right? Like you can do it the quote unquote normal RSC way with just async components and stuff, but maybe we'll keep loaders and stuff around as well. Because a lot of people like that sort of like controller view separation bit, and maybe there's some deployment techniques that unlocks as well. I know for sure for me, loaders are really nice because we can run them before rendering for things like middleware and redirects and URL rewrites. Like there's a lot of stuff that you want to do before you're in the render cycle. And React, that's honestly one of my biggest misgivings at the moment with React with server components is once you're rendering, like you started rendering, so it's hard to do something like redirect. And in Remix, it's pretty cool. You can just throw a redirect from a loader, and it's like, okay, I'm not going to actually render this path. I'm going to do a different one now. There might be some reasons to keep loaders and all that kind of stuff around, but we know for sure that we want them for a migration path. So let's dig into this and look at it. So this is both definitely a migration path, potentially stuff we want to just keep around in the future if we discover like, oh yeah, this is really cool for these 3, 4, 5 reasons.
Yeah. So Jacob had this really cool idea where he was like, what if we've got these loaders? What if we return components out of the loader?
Our whole team jokes around that it's React serialized components, RSC. That's really what it is. It's like a content type.
Yeah. So the way you can think about these components that are being returned out of the loader or these elements, these are just like data, right? They're just like data on the page instead of like you can already, if you really wanted to, you could return HTML out of a loader, and you could just say, dangerously set inner HTML and in your component, and off you go, right?
Yeah, I've done that. I was sending emails from an app in Remix, and in the loader I just said render to static markup, and that gave me a chunk of HTML right in my loader.
Yeah. So you can already return these, static bits of markup that are either you're doing email or you're doing you're just doing some markdown, or you just want some static stuff and you don't want to send a big payload to the client. And so this is basically doing that with React, right? It's just saying you can return an element out of your loader here, and then you go down below and use loader data, and everything works as normal, except for it's obviously not static, right? These elements, as Jacob is showing here, like the article content can be an async component, and now you get to take advantage of suspense fallbacks.
You don't have to do the defer, the remix defer and then suspense and then await dance, right? Like we added
Mhm.
streaming, React supported streaming before server components. And so we took advantage of that, but we had to come up with a couple APIs in order to get that promise over the network. And this allows you to just skip that step and just render an async component in the loader and then put a suspense around it here. If you're, so yeah, one way to think of this is it's just more data coming out of your loader. If you're familiar with Next.js, one of the things that they did to help get rid of waterfalls is parallel routes. And those parallel routes are a file system convention where they'll automatically pass in some props to your route layout. And then it's really just another way to look at this is like, oh, this is actually how you would do quote unquote parallel routes in Remix as well, is just have your loader prepare those things. And then they pop out here from loader data instead of from props. So really similar concept there that can solve the same problems, but here you have total control over it instead of a file convention.
Yeah, so lots of stuff to like here, honestly. One of the main benefits of server components is you don't have to, hydrate the static bits in the client, or you don't have to like send component code right to the client. And this actually achieves that objective like pretty nicely, and it's still a fully like client rendered React app, just with like static pieces sort of embedded in it, as opposed to a static app with dynamic pieces embedded in it. It's kind of the inverse of that. It's a client rendered app, static chunks here and there, which is not a bad model, right? Like, I mean, honestly, I think this example illustrates it pretty well. You've got this big chunk of content, right? Like very many content sites are structured like this, right? Where you have, you're looking at, you're looking at like a blog or a news site or something. And the content isn't really interactive, but it's like a big chunk of the page, right?
And even if it had interactive bits, use client is still going to work in here too. So you'll get those interactive pieces too.
Right. Yeah. So there's that, but then also it's still within the, I feel like it's still within the the Remix programming model, right? The Remix model of, okay, we're going to run all of your loaders in parallel, and we're not going to you don't have to worry about the waterfall if you don't want to. Obviously you can. That's the thing that obviously you can introduce the component rendering waterfall if you want to, but you can avoid it if you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Another really cool thing about this that we aren't seeing in the proposal yet is actions can also return RSC content. So like you could render your form in the loader, and then in the action you could do the validation, and then you could render the form again from your action, but with the validation errors in it. And you just skip the whole use action data dance and like conditional rendering dance inside of your component. And your loader and your action are saying, here's the form before it's filled out, here's the form with errors. And fetchers also, fetcher.load, fetcher.submit, the fetcher.data thing, that thing can also, since it's coming from loaders and actions, that can also have RSC content on it. So like all of the current paradigms of Remix you can keep, and then you can just be like, oh, you know what? This rendering is mostly static. I don't want to put that in my JavaScript bundles. You can just move it into your loader or action and just pull out the pieces that don't need to be hydrated or sent in bundles. So yeah, really cool. A great migration path. At Remix, one of the biggest things that we think about for RSC is when you're plugged into a CMS or something like that, right? And it's you need to fetch data before you know what kinds of components you're going to render. That's kind of like the biggest win. I've got this data. maybe it's like a news feed, or maybe it's a activity dashboard or something like that. And you're like, I need data before I even know my components. And that's right in line with Remix's focus on being dynamic instead of static, which we have focused on that since the beginning. And this allow, like, if you need to know all of your potential components at build time for a route, that's actually kind of like a static thing, right? Like you're wrapping up this concept of, oh, these 30 components might be rendered. I need to put that in my bundle ahead of time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where now with RSC, we can be more dynamic, which is what always been our goal. And we can be like, oh, I don't need to bundle. Those are going to go into their own use client bundles if you even need them.
Mm-hmm.
And then get data and then render. And then the browser will only get the parts that you want. So all the benefits of RSC come with this. All the paradigms from Remix that you love and you're used to, you can keep. I'd say the only thing that this is missing is it's the joke I've been saying internally is I think a lot of people will look at this and think, oh, okay, so that's just RSC with more steps.
Yeah, so let's talk about the reason for why don't we just, move the await down into the component and then put the elements down there as well into the component.
Yeah, because you can easily rewrite this as just move this stuff boink 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 down into here and just do it inside the component. And we talked about this yesterday internally. It's not in the RSC, but we're going to support that too, where you can export an async function named component, and now that one is just RSC content. And so you can skip the whole use loader data component dance, and just do it right there in the component. Like in the root component, this would be fantastic because the root is what hydrates the whole document. And so if you just export an async component for your root route, your hydration woes in the head with browser plugins and stuff all go away, because there's no like client hydration happening inside of that head module or a head component. So yeah, we'll support both. If you just want to do it all in the component, you can. That'll be a new export out of the route modules. Or you can keep the loader separate up there if you like that model better.
Yeah, so in that model that we just mentioned, that will literally be like, I think mostly the same as what people are used to with the RSC examples that they're seeing coming out of Next.
Yeah,
right?
so it could, like, this is what this looks like now, but you could come down here, and then instead of saying export default, this is just what we're thinking right now, talking to Jacob yesterday a little bit.
Export async function component, right?
Yeah, export async. And then you don't need that stuff. And then you just do the components right inside. So get rid of those extra steps. Just move it down into here. And then you can skip that
Get rid of your loader
if you don't find it useful.
Yeah. So the plan now is
and now so what this would do is this wouldn't create a client bundle for your route component. The only bundles that are going to come for this route is any use clients that show up in the components that get rendered.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting to think how when you move things around, like how the bundles change, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Component was a client component before, when we had the loader.
Yeah.
It was a client component, and so we had to create a bundle for it, send that bundle to the client, whoever was rendering it, and then the client would render that component with its data, which in this case just happened to be React Server components.
And what's nice with this model, keeping your loader around, is now you can come in here and you can, like, if you need some state and some hooks and stuff, you can keep your loader and you can keep your component like right here by each other. The RSC stuff you put off in other files. And now, because I have a lot of routes where like one of the things that I don't love about RSC is how many more components you need, right? Like it's like when hooks showed up. Render props were the big deal to do composition and components, and you could do it all in one component. And then hooks came up and was like, oh, hooks can't be rendered conditionally. And so that made it so that you had to take chunks of stuff that you did with render props, take this whole callback out, make its own component, and then put the hooks there. And so it kind of like forced you into this, like, you have to compose components now instead of it was kind of optional. Use client or RSC kind of does the same thing where it's like, oh, if you want interactivity, you're going to have to pull out some code and move it over into a client component. Where I think this gives you a nice little middle ground where a lot of my routes, it's like, I've got my loader, I got my action, I've got my component, and like that is everything for this entire page. And I like keeping that all in one file. And this lets you do that where your top level route component can still use hooks and stuff. So I think it's going to be just super flexible for the paradigm that you want to use.
That's a good point, huh? You can't actually use. So right now component is a client component, right?
Yeah, because we're doing the export default. And
so if we switch to a server component, then you can't use the hooks anymore in there.
Yeah,
right?
If I get rid of the default there, then it's like, oh, no more hooks. I move the header down. Here, we'll see. Let's just do that one more time.
Yeah.
Put that stuff down, and now no more hooks.
Yeah.
So it's like, how much co-location do you want? And what do you want to do with your bundles? Do you want, because what this means is, sorry, the other way. I should really
no, you're doing it right.
Yeah, well, so I wanted to go back. So this way, when you're exporting a default one, everything in here and any component that gets rendered inside of this route is going to be bundled and sent to the browser. So if you grabbed this async render markdown thing and rendered it down here instead, that's going to go in a client bundle because by default, current route components are use client. You just don't have to say use client on it. That's a great migration path. Yeah, when you move it all back down into a server component, then none of that stuff goes. Only the ones that have a use client somewhere. But you can't use state there. So it'll be interesting to see the having the migration path gives you a lot of choices on where to do data. And that stresses me out a little bit, but that's the cost of having migration paths, is there's now two ways to do similar things. But I think we're going to discover some patterns that people are like, actually, you know what? I like this better than having my whole route component be a server component. I really like this co-location, or I like the ability to do this, or I think we're going to find some things that we might want to keep around. They're just really hard to predict right now, what you may or may not be able to do.
But I like this model because you've already got a lot of existing React code.
Yeah.
That's using the hooks, and you can't just like what is the alternative? The alternative is, all of that code is just, like if we just made the jump straight to the end game, right? If we just made the jump straight to end, RSC, import components and use them directly in your other components. You would basically take all that existing code and you would put use client in all of it, because they're all using hooks, right? And then the migration path, the migration strategy from there would be, if you wanted to make some of those server components, you would basically have to remove, basically hoist those hooks up to like a higher level component. Like if you had a use state, You'd kind of
Yeah.
like hoist it up to a higher level, use client component, and then pass down as props. But in this model, you really just get to kind of, I mean, it's not any different really. It's just trade-offs. It's just
Well,
trade-offs of like,
there's a lot of there'll be a lot of shuffling of code around to like go
yeah,
to jump straight to it. Where this is like, oh, you know what? This header's pretty much static. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna move that into my loader, right?
mm-hmm,
And then and render it up there instead. Like you can do these little tiny changes until you realize, oh, almost every like eventually this thing might just look like I'm not doing anything except for rendering server components that my loader gave me.
mm-hmm,
And that's the point where you're probably like, you know what? Let's just do all this stuff right inside the component because now I'm there, right? So you can do it
mm-hmm,
incrementally instead
mm-hmm.
of just a big bang all at once. So yeah,
And
I think
those
it'll be
components come, those elements come back down.
yep. And then they come back down. They went up and then they come back down. But that's the thing is you can do them all one at a time until you realize, oh, that whole route, I don't have any hooks in here anymore. Everything is moved into the loader. It's time. I can now just turn this one into a server component instead of,
It is time.
okay, let's do the dashboard as server components. What do we do? Let's go make a new route and let's go figure out, okay, who has hooks, who doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
hooks. And then you got to go top down where this approach, we're going to be able to just like, this piece moves to the loader, this piece moves to the loader, this moves to the loader until it's all up there. And you can just put it right back down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm excited about it. And we have so many other things that we want to do with Remix. I'm happy that we've all kind of come to alignment on what to do with server components because we have been excited about them the whole time. It's just like it's big change. It's been hard to follow as it like moves around.
It's been very hard to follow actually,
Yeah,
and I don't want to sound too negative about it because like when you're in the R&D phase, lots of times it's just so difficult to, I mean, if you don't really have the whole story figured out yet, it's really difficult to share it. You can tell it,
yeah,
but then next month when you tell it to somebody else after you've thought about it for another month, it changed a little bit, right? And so you're telling a slightly different story. Um, and I feel like that's a little bit what we've been getting from the React team is like they're figuring it out. The story keeps changing a little bit. These components didn't used to be async, now they're async. Stuff like that
yeah.
has been changing. Um,
The hardest, the frustrating part is that there's this sense in the community that like, oh, because Remix hasn't shipped this, like they're behind, or when are you going to do this, or whatever. There's this hype about it of like, this is how you're supposed to do React now. And it's like, it's not even released yet. Like, just let the people cook for a minute, like,
yeah. Well, that that
but
was that was the other misunderstanding is that I think we were under the impression that the canaries were not stable. And that, when at some point these features stabilized, that they would be put into a normal, minor release of React, like a normal, stable
yeah,
minor release. And that is not, it's apparently that's not how the React team intends those to be used. They're shipping code in the canaries that they consider to be stable for frameworks. Which to me was just a different way of shipping software. Like it's a different, I mean, we've been doing React now for almost 10 years. Ugh,
yeah,
weird to say it that way. But React has always just been a pure dep, right? And now it's a dep. Now it's they're saying you should pin, essentially you should pin Remix to a React canary, which makes it our code. And so
Yeah, and that's been a
So,
weird thing to kind of like realize and be like, oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So when Next came out and said, "Hey, these features are stable. This RSC stuff is stable," and we were like, "But it's not in a stable release. It's only in a canary release." Oh, I guess you guys are considering the stuff in the canaries stable code because you own it, right? So that for us was a little bit of a wake up call. Like, oh, okay, React is now shipping what they consider to be stable code in canary releases.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's hard, and we're working with the React team on this with some of our concerns, but like when it moves from peer depth for Remix to just a dependency, like you don't even need it in your package JSON anymore for your Remix app.
yeah,
That's weird for the rest of the ecosystem with like you bringing in Radix or you're bringing in React Aria or you're bringing in React Router.
yeah.
um, those things have a peer dep on React, and so it's just kind of, so now are you supposed to have, is React Aria supposed to have a peer dep on Remix
Yes, exactly.
instead?
That's the third order effect, right?
Yeah, and then that
Is
doesn't work because they need it for Next too. So now is everything, is it an optional dep? Which, I mean, JavaScript already gets made fun of enough for our dependency management, but we've got dependency, peer dependency, and optional dependency. And this like
yeah,
moving React to a dependency of Remix is just, what does that mean? Like that means a
yeah,
lot.
yeah, exactly. It has huge implications for the rest of the community.
Yeah. So those are some of our
I
things that
mean,
we're
peer
still.
dependencies. I remember first learning about peer dependencies. I think it was Dominic Denicola wrote the
Yeah,
article that kind of helped me understand, like, oh, these are for libraries, right?
that's what they're for. I'm building a backbone
Mm-hmm.
thing. I've got a special kind of model for your
Yeah.
backbone app.
This
I
is
don't
for
actually depend on backbone. You do.
Yeah, exactly. This is how you build an ecosystem, right? Of people
Yeah.
who can all use the shared sort of third party library, and it's all a peer dep. And React is going contrary to that model now, which is I mean that's how it works at Facebook, I feel like, which is uh and I here's the thing. I know that their plan is to eventually, you know, these features that they're shipping in the canaries, eventually the plan is that they will be included in a stable release, right?
Yeah.
So the feedback we've received from them is like, well, you could just wait. You could just wait for the stable release. But then that also makes it look like we're behind. So it's a hard place for us to be in as a competitor for Next and as a third party library. And it feels yeah, it just feels like a hard place to be in.
And there's use
But we're
cases that we
figuring it out.
absolutely want from it too. So what you're saying is it is an eventual peer dep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Eventually it'll
And
be a peer dep.
I think we'll just we might say, hey, you need a peer dependency on this canary, right? So like we can keep the peer dependency thing going, but we'll just say, hey, like at the moment on Remix 2.6, if you want to use RSC, you need your peer dependency to be this specific canary, because that's what ours is going to be. Then we could keep it as a peer dep. And of course, you can do tricks with your packages. You can npmi-f and force it because you know it's going to work. So there are solutions around this to not actually have to make React a direct dependency of Remix. It's just yucky. That's all.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what these live streams are for. This is so people can feel our pain, feel what we're, or not feel our pain. Nobody wants to feel pain when they watch YouTube. This is just the stuff that we think about, It's just the stuff that we think about as we're building Remix.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm tired because I have a sick kid and we haven't gotten a whole lot of sleep lately, but so my enthusiasm isn't probably coming through right now, but I'm actually really pumped about this because there's a lot of problems that the RSC solves really, really well, and I'm excited to bring it to Remix.
Cool. Well, let's I think that was kind of the main thing that we wanted to get through today. We could also talk about client data, which I know Matt is doing a lot of work on. We figured out some stuff around that this week, right?
Yeah. I
Figured
should
out.
probably pull up my VS Code. Can't you like do, how do you get VS Code pulled up on GitHub? I forgot how you do that.
Oh, you put, yeah, don't you press like X or something, or the period or something? Like when you're
Oh, like
looking
I
at
would
a,
need to be in a
like you're looking at a file and then you press some hotkey.
yeah.
I rarely ever do it. Let me see if I can.
Anyway, maybe I should just
Or I know what I'm like when I'm looking at a PR. Let me pull up a PR.
whatever. I'm just gonna pull up VS Code so we can talk about this a little
Yeah,
more.
you press the period if you're looking at a PR, and then it gives you like the full blown editor.
Um, Give me 1 sec.
And it takes like 30 seconds to load.
I'm just gonna switch the screen I'm sharing. Where are you? Code. Boink. All right. Client data.
Yeah, just ask Copilot to do it. What the heck? You have to do any work here.
Yeah, so we can export a loader today in Remix, right? And you can turn stuff. And then now you can export a client loader. It'll get similar things like the params and all that kind of stuff. You're obviously not going to get a request. Well, I don't know. Yeah, you do get a anyway. You're going to get all the same things that React router loaders get. And then we don't know what this is called yet. Server loader or something. Call server. I don't know. So you could get your server stuff. And then you could add in some client stuff. Like maybe it came from local storage. There you go. Something like that. And then both of these things will come out in your loader data.
Yep.
Copilot is crazy. So that's the idea. And so what I think we talked about this a little bit last week, but the thing that we are doing is client fallback, right?
Yep.
Every time we add a new export to the route module, we're like, what are we doing? Are we sure this is what we want to do?
Now you
So
got to think carefully.
yeah, we don't add these lightly. But the big thing that we worked out this week was what does an initial load look like? Because you might have some stuff that you want to be able to server render, right? This server stuff, that one came from up here. And you would be able to server render that. And then maybe you got this other stuff, the client stuff, that you can't actually render initially, right? And so the big thing that we're kind of figuring out right now is what does that initial load look like? If you export a client fallback, then we're going to server render as many routes as we can until we hit one that has a client fallback. And then we're like, oh, you have a client fallback. That means I can't show anything in this route until I call the client loader. So it's gonna server render the whole page until it hits a route that has a client fallback, and then it'll fall back here with whatever you've got in there. And then once JavaScript loads, then we can call your client loader, and we can say, all right, now we're going to take your server stuff. And by the way, on the initial document, it's not going to have to make a fetch here. We already know the data. It's in the HTML already. So we'll just pull it from there. And then we'll get the stuff from local storage, and then we'll stop falling back, and then we can render your component. But there are other use cases where it's like, oh, I only want client loaders, or I'm not actually merging anything here. I'm just doing a cache. So like if your client loader, like I think this is one of the primary use cases is you just want to cache you want a server render, But then from there, you want to do all your fetching straight from the browser, right? If you're talking to the Shopify API, for instance, you might want a server render, so you can talk to the Shopify API here, get product server side with the params. And then in the client, you don't actually care about doing that, and you want to get product client side. If you don't have a client fallback, then we're just going to call your loader on the initial document. And so then you're going to have your product in here. Because you didn't export a client fallback, we're saying, oh, okay, they don't actually care about the client loader on that initial render from the server. So for the first document, we'll just give you this. And then in the future, when you click on links, we're going to call the client loader. And if that returns the same shape of data down here, then you're good. And it's up to you to decide when, like, it's not our job to say, oh, which loader are we going to call? If you have a client loader, we always just call the client loader. It's your job to ever call the server loader if you want to. I think this is probably one of the biggest use cases that people have, and is why we came up with the API with the client fallback that we did. A lot of times you're just mirroring the same data in there. This is also a spot to go in and use like TanStack query to put stuff into its cache. So you can do like a back click and immediately go back, because Remix will just call your client loader. You'll just pull it from TanStack query's cache, and you never even go talk to the server in that case. But to reiterate, if you export a thing called client fallback, then in this case, on the initial document, because we don't know what you're doing in your client loader and your server loader, we're going to say, all right, you must care about both server data and client data, like you're merging these things together. So we're going to fall back, wait till we hydrate, call your client loader, and then go. But if you don't give us a client fallback, initial document, we only call the loader. Client navigations, we only call the client loader. So pretty simple rule there. Did I get all that right? Sorry, I went off.
Yeah, no, you totally did. So this is a big part of our migration story from React Router to Remix, right? Because in React Router, your loaders are all client loaders in a pure SPA built with React Router. Your loaders and actions are all client. They're running all client side. And so, if you had a React Router app that you've built, and we've got a lot of them at Shopify, that are using our data loading patterns. What's the path look like to get into full-blown Remix? Let's talk about that, kind of our plan for that.
Yeah, so there's another where here we are. There's another thing that we've got on here, Remix SPA target. So what you'll be able to do here is, since we're built on Vite, is you can, if your React Router app is already on Vite, if it's on Webpack, maybe get it to Vite first. The Vite community has made that bridge pretty good. And then you're on Vite, and you can say target SPA. And what this gets you is all the Remix conventions, like your file convention for your routes. You're going to import links from Remix Run React instead of like everything's coming from React Router. It'll come from Remix. So it'll look exactly like a Remix app. We just won't create the server build. We're just going to create the client build, and you'll have an entry HTML here like this that Vite will use. So Remix has entry server, entry client. Here, instead of having entry server, you'll have entry HTML, and that's what the Remix plugin the Vite plugin will look for. And now it's just Vite from here. And so what you'll be able to do is take your React Router app, plug this in, and then in your entry client, you'll just keep on doing exactly what we haven't illustrated this like the first 2 steps onto the bridge. But right now you have an like a root level main TSX or whatever in a React Router app, and so we haven't shown what that part looks like yet. But you should be able to just do that in your entry client. In like, bring this in, entry client will look the same. You're not even going to use the Remix route conventions or any of that stuff yet, and everything should still work. But then you'll switch up your entry client. Where is it? You'll switch up your entry client to look like this and start using Remix.
Mhm.
And now you can start putting files into the routes, and you can switch all your imports over to Remix stuff. And when you move it into the routes folder, now you can export a client loader and a client action, which is, you've already got them somewhere in a React Router app. So you'll move it into the routes folder or configure it. And wherever you've put your loaders there, you'll put them in your route modules instead, but it'll all just run in the client. There's no server rendering at all. So all your code should still work. You're just getting the conventions and the imports from Remix. And so it's a full-blown Remix app. It just doesn't have server rendering. And then the migration from there is really cool. Then you can come in here and say, you know what, we're going to target server rendering. Deploy your server somewhere, Cloudflare, Express, Vercel, whatever. And all that's going to do is that's going to have us build a server module for your app as well. But if all you're doing is using client loaders still, like, nothing's really happening in the SSR step. Like, we're going to SSR basically a blank page.
Yep.
And then the browser takes over again. And now the migration gets super interesting because you have a bunch of decisions that you can make depending on what you need to do. But you can look at this client loader and be like, you know what? This fetch will work on the server too. I'm just going to get rid of this client part and just export loader. And now Remix will server render that route.
Mm-hmm.
And then do the route below that and the route below that. And now those 3 routes are all exporting loader instead of client loader. And the whole page is server rendered. Or switch it to RSC. Maybe like, you know what? I want the loader to run in the browser, but I'm going to return some RSC content out of here. And the Remix server will handle that for you. So it's like, you can move code to the server in so many different ways. Move it to the loader, move it to an RSC on the loader, move your actions from client actions to server actions. Like, so many, it's not just one bridge. There's like, once you're on this first bridge.
Well, we're going to have to be like, sorry to interrupt. We're going to have to be really careful about just like helping people understand, like, when you write some code differently, the bundles change.
Yeah.
Right. If you opt into this mode, you know, if you opt into RSC, for example, like, this is different bundles. Or if you switch from client loader to loader, like, this loads on this runs on the server, and like, this runs in a different place now, right? Just because you named it something differently.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I started on a document last night for that exact conversation.
Yeah.
But so here's why it's so cool, because it may sound like, oh my gosh, there's going to be too many ways to load data or whatever. There are valid use cases for all of them, but what's so cool about it is you're moving from a full-blown SPA, React Router and Webpack, you get on Vite, you come over to Remix, and then you turn on this SSR bit. You may have a route where, like, your client loader, there's way too much stuff in the browser to like move all of that to the server right now. Like, you just can't do it. But there's this big expensive markdown thing, or there's this expensive, I don't know what else, right? There's an expensive component, and you're like, I want that on the server. You can just move that one thing into an RSC. I don't know if you can do it in the client loader exactly. We'll have to see what that looks like. But you can move it up into a loader in Remix, just that one bit, and then leave the rest of the client loader there. And you get that out of your bundles, right? Maybe that thing's 100 kilobytes, and now you moved it into the loader returning RSC, and now it's 0 kilobytes coming down in your JavaScript. So we're just trying to give you a lot of ways to get code out of the browser onto the server, or out of the server into the browser, if that makes more sense, because you got a cache there or something. Yeah, lots of.
Yeah. So this spot target RFC is next up on our roadmap. after we finish up client data, getting the client loader and client fallback and stuff
Yep.
in
As soon
there.
as that's there, we can do this.
As soon as that's there, we can do spot target. So lots of exciting stuff coming down. So we're coming up on an hour. So I just kind of wanted to wrap it up. There were a couple of questions though in the chat that I wanted to get to.
Cool.
The big question I think that was asked that I think most people are going to be interested in is, when is Vite going to be stable? When are we going to say that that thing is stable? So, we released our Vite plugin for Remix like 2 weeks ago. It's just been kind of simmering. We've been, a lot of people are testing it out. We're like working out all the kinks, working out all the bugs. Mark and Pedro are both working on that a lot. I think my estimate would be that we'll be stable, before the end of the year, or like, sometime in early January. Like I really don't think it's going to go further than that. So if I was, using Remix and I wanted to be like, aligning myself with the future of this framework, I would definitely put in some time to make the switch to Vite. Hopefully it won't be too painful. We've done as much as we can to, so you can like, use your existing Remix config and in the Vite plugin, and a lot of the flags from the existing Remix config you can pass to the new Vite plugin. So definitely take time to check that out and make that migration as soon as possible, because that will be stable in the very near future.
I want to also just clarify that when we say it's stable, that doesn't mean the old one goes away. This is a future flag like everything else. So in V2, the old compiler will work all the way until we ship V3, which we don't have a date for that yet. So as soon as we say it's stable, you still have a lot of time to upgrade to Vite.
Totally.
Yeah.
So Vite is stable. Unstable Vite is here. Stable Vite is imminent. We're working on it actively every day.
Yeah, bug stuff, and one thing for sure is we need to make like Cloudflare work with Wrangler and all that kind of stuff in development. And yeah.
Somebody was asking about our file upload support. It was unstable in V1. It's still unstable in V2. Do we have any plans to dedicate some time towards stabilizing file upload APIs in the near future?
What's funny is that multi-part form data showed up so that you could upload files from HTML. And then the web request response APIs are actually kind of difficult to work with, or form data. to then support it, right?
I think we can do it just fine with, but request.form data is a bet. Yeah,
it's
it doesn't
a promise,
support,
so you get the whole thing. You don't get
exactly. It doesn't support streaming. Yeah,
and it's funny because form data was introduced so that you could like stream up a file upload, and then we get it on the server, and it's like, oh, now I got to await the whole thing.
So exactly. So what we have to do is we have to stabilize our parse multi-part form data method, which is our answer to that. So you can still stream the file data to storage, and you don't have to buffer the whole thing. I personally would like to get that stabilized. It feels like it's been a long time that it's just been sitting there unstable, but we also like it works.
Yeah.
For most small files. I think the only place where it really breaks is on very large files. And then we've also just got so much other stuff on our roadmap. I don't know that we're gonna prioritize that anytime soon.
And I would say we kind of lost control of our roadmap because of RSC and the hype around it and the pressure to do something about it.
It feels like there are some bigger fish to fry.
Kind of derailed us a bit.
Well, also this whole like SPA mode and client data stuff is stuff that is very high priority for people who are trying to build Shopify apps and things. So
Well,
So
a
that,
huge constraint there is the whole iframe cookie thing. So it's
Mhm.
like, all right, remix spa mode of just like, let's just solve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So that stuff takes precedence. So yeah, there are like some kind of structural sort of foundational things that we're just trying to take care of. And then we will definitely circle back and stabilize any API that's marked unstable in Remix right now.
I think
Eric,
maybe my bias here comes through too on the file uploads where I'm like, I don't want to deal with those files. Just upload it straight to AWS. They
yeah.
got client libraries for that. Like, keep that off of my server. I don't want to deal with that.
Eric Tomeo asked about middleware. We have not talked about middleware, though it is on the roadmap.
Oh, we didn't?
No, we didn't really talk about it.
It's going to be awesome.
Yeah,
It
so this,
requires single fetch first. So let's
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about this
yeah,
next time.
yeah. We'll talk about this one on our next stream. Let's talk about this on our next stream.
And
But
why it got shelved for a minute and why it depends on single fetch first.
yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
Essentially, if I could explain it, I think in like very succinctly, the whole idea is that uh we need to change our data request model from the browser, because if we're still making multiple fetches for a navigation, then essentially your middleware is going to be running multiple times, and that's not what you would expect. Multiple middleware runs on a single navigation, right?
Yeah, and there's things that we want to build in middleware that you can't do. Like if you want to share stuff across a request cache, like a user object, right? Only get
Right.
it for one route asks for it, and then all of them get it from the same spot. Like
Right.
if they're three separate requests. But anyway, yeah, we could have anyway, we'll talk about it next week. I was
Cool.
about to go into it.
Cool. We'll dig into that next week. Right on. I think that's it for this week. So thank you everybody for joining us. It's always a pleasure to share with you all what we're working on. And for those of you who celebrate, have a happy Thanksgiving this week. And
I
we
was
will
gonna
see
do
you.
a turkey background.
Yeah, we should have. We should have been wearing like pilgrim hats or something, gnawing on a piece of corn over here. Something. All right. We'll see you guys in another couple of weeks. Thanks.